First up are chunky bitches and tube tops, proof of gang activity in your neighborhood.
I don't think this is funny.
Next, calls for Pakistan and India to de-escalate so the news pundits don't actually have to learn about a new thing. Next, are windmills causing rare atmospheric phenomenon and other made-up things liberals are working on to cover their asses, like spontaneously existing migrants in urban areas or the earthquake that consumed all the Social Security funds. Next, a first look at McDonald's McCrispy strips and how brands are ramping up on new unhealthy options to keep consumers' attention in light of food dye bans, with a focused pivot away from causing autism and a restructuring back to clogging arteries. Next, why Trump is saying polls are bullshit, everyone actually loves me more than they ever did. Frankly, I don't even understand how people can love me this much, but you'll see, once tariffs start paying your mortgage, they'll love me even more. Next, with fertility rates down, how much can you get paid to take a load from Elon Musk? To remind voters he's doing the right thing by knocking up random Twitter sluts. Next, Klaus Schwab is out at the World Economic Forum for doing the exact thing you would expect, with the World Economic Forum appointing a new executive with a better track record of implementing slave labor and controlling water supplies.
It's your daily dose of misinformation, pulled from a lightly hemorrhoided asshole. It's today's Run Your Mouth!
People try and tell you what you gotta do. Don't you listen to them unless you think it's true. Follow your heart and your dreams. Follow your heart and your dreams.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Run Your Mouth podcast. It is a pleasure to be joined with you on this fine Wednesday afternoon, and we will be back to a more regular schedule. I think Wednesdays are going to be standard, and then I'd like to be doing Sunday nights, and then hopefully get this paywall up and start doing Saturday episodes and more content coming at you. First is I threw out my back, which is absolutely hilarious. You try and do everything you can to not be an old Jew, and then it's your genes. It's what happens. You give it another year of back pain, I'm going to be talking about ethnic cleansing the Gazans because the Israels have a rightful heritage from the Bible to that land. It's only a matter of time before my nose grows bigger, my back hurts even more, and you start hearing me simping for Israel. It's funny. I was out in Florida. I had a great time. Porch tour off to a strong start. I was crashed by Rob Vincent. I had a blast. I got out there. It was ADD friendly. Took an early morning flight. Ate some brisket. Swam in the ocean. Drove over to Mobile, Alabama. We had a fun show right by some guy's closed pool. Ate some Buc-ee's. Usually Buc-ee's doesn't happen until later in the tour. I thought you got to go all the way to Texas to get high and eat some Buc-ee's at 1 in the morning. But it was an absolute blast, and everybody, please go support Porch Tour. Buy your tickets early. Don't make me sit around I already got enough things to be nervous about. I got back pain on my mind. Do me a favor. Just get out there and buy your Porch Tour tickets. The next run of Porch is going to be West Palm Beach, St. Augustine, Florida, which is already shaping up to be a good market. We're moving tickets in St. Augustine, Florida. And then I'm out to Texas doing a run of shows. I think that's the next one. We're doing, firstly, I'm going to be back in Austin. The Austin show is one of the most stacked shows of the entire tour because I pull some of the greats from Austin, Texas. I will be doing a live pod with Scott Horton. Then we're going to be at the Meter Turns on Saturday. That's out by the beach. It's a bit of a hike, but we've got the Owen Glass Band opening up. We've got more comics on that one. Might do a podcast on energy stuff, and then going to be in one other Texas area that I can't remember, but it was also poolside, and it was a nice time. Yeah, I was feeling good when I was out in Florida. I can't do pull-ups, went back to chin-ups. I was doing push-ups all day. I was squatting. I was getting my workouts, and I was like, all right, I think I'm getting back to fitness. And then Sunday, I took off, and then yesterday I was back to my desk, reading the news, doing sandbag squats, and I was like, you don't need 100 people to take a gorilla. I can fight a gorilla. I'm like, I'm a strong boy. I am getting it back. I'm past these injuries. the BPC 197s, the baby bloods I got from Nancy Pelosi. It's all coming. And then I did one more squat. I was like, oh no, I'm never going to be able to walk again. And now I'm hobbling around staring at people like, don't you look at me making a bunch of old man noises and absolutely dreading getting on a 6-hour flight to San Diego. I'm trying to figure out what cocktail I'm going to take in the morning to get through that flight. It might be kratom and whiskeys, or I might go vodka and I'm thinking Ambien, but I don't have my hands on any Ambien. It might be a vodka NyQuil morning, and hope that I sleep through that entire flight and then only have to scream once when getting out of my chair. But anyways, I'm looking forward to San Diego, working on these jokes, working out all the kinks so that I got a polished 40 when I'm out there on somebody's lawn, slinging back some beers and having a good time. Porch Tour, www.porchtour.com. You can see it. There's about 40 dates. There's only a couple more porches left to confirm, and then I got to be done with that because I want to get this operation back on a regular schedule. And when I got to do logistic, it brings out Adderall and the worst side of my procrastination and personality, and it really puts a hiccup in the general flow, which is talking more nonsense on this show and not being too finicky about researching the economics of tariffs. It's about getting on the air and just spewing some good old-fashioned bullshit. That's what I want to do on a more fluid and regular basis, is talking absolute nonsense. We can leave the intelligence to the other people, the researching to the other people. This show is supposed to be rooted in nonsense and sandwich talk. Bring back Yosef and talk about back pain. That's what I say. Quick shout out before we get into some random topics to Fairhope Brewing Company and the Ungovernable Misfit podcast. In order to raise more revenue to keep up with the tariffs and the inflations, I have added a sponsor option for Porch Tour. And it's not a bad deal. It's $250. You can bring as many people as you'd like to the porch. I'll plug you at the live event, and then I'll plug you on a Run Your Mouth podcast. It's a bit of a value buy there. And if you buy in advance, it makes me feel good about suffering through all this back pain and booking all these flights. And so the first sponsor was at the show that I did out in Florida and wanted me to plug the Fairhope Brewing Company and the Ungovernable Misfit podcast. All right, I do have a couple of random etiquette questions, and then we will get into the news. Let's start with this one. What's the general feeling about spitting zins? Because, you know, we let dogs pee in the street. Humans can't pee in the street, but if you got a dog, it could just walk right in front of me, start peeing in the street. It's a little bit gross, but we allow for it. And for a long period of time, we allowed for the flicking of cigarette butts. That was also a little bit gross. Nothing else can you just toss in the street, but for some reason, the cigarette butt, and listen, sometimes you're on a street and it's got the ashtray, and then you're being a bit of a dick if you're throwing your cigarette. If you're outside of a restaurant, they got the big, tall ashtray thing right there. You shouldn't be flicking your cigarette butt in the street, but for the most part, even though gross, I believe that it is a allowable behavior to put out a cigarette and flick a cigarette butt into the street. And now I ask you, fine people, how do we feel about the zins? Because I'd like to be a more responsible zin consumer. I'd like to be tossing them into garbages. I actually did something really gross during the live part of the problem that we did from Chicago, which was I had double zins in my mouth. I'm working the crowd. That was a fun live podcast. You can catch it on comicdavesmith.com. I think that's the link. I don't know. I don't even know the link for the part of the problem website. I just wear the hat and work on the show. But maybe it's part of the problem.com. We did a live podcast in Chicago, and I was working the crowd, and there was some guy who had a glass in front of him. I was like, hey, man, you're done with that drink? He goes, yeah. I'm like, you're definitely done with it? He goes, yeah. And then I just put both my zins in it, and we both laughed because it was disgusting. But, you know, you want to be filling your pockets with your dirty zins? And sure, you can argue just don't do the zins. But, you know, once you crack that thing open and you're shoving them in your mouth in the morning so you can read the daily news, that's where we're at. So I'm curious. What do the fans in the chat think about zin spitting? Is that an allowable behavior? If you're walking down a sidewalk and you're done with your zin, can you spit that into the street? Or are you absolutely a disgusting animal if you do that? We've got some people saying no zins in the urinal, which that checks out because, you know, that's like one of those impulsive things where you definitely shouldn't do it, but it kind of makes sense while you're peeing. It's like farting while you're peeing. Just kind of makes sense. And I understand that. If you're in a bathroom, there's no reason for it. There's a garbage not far away. There's a readily accessible garbage that there's no reason to spit yours into the urinal so that some janitor is going to have to reach their hand in there at some point in time and actually take a Zin out of the urinal because they don't flush. You can't be flushing the Zins. So I'll agree with you on that. You should not be. John Popa coming through. It's littering, so it's bad. Find a trash can. All right, reasonable. Mr. Fire, no commie Colorado porch store stops. Cheers and be well. I think this year Colorado has been my single best market. That's why I chose to film live from the Denver Comedy Garage there last year. I pulled the most people, and we've had absolute blasts of shows. This year, Dave, I'm opening up for Dave at Comedy Works, which people say is the best club in the country. I've never played it, and it's in the middle of July, so I don't know that it makes sense porching. I definitely write jokes and tell my jokes, and more often than not in the exact order that I have them memorized in. And so I do not like repeating markets unless I have a fresh, 30 to 40 minutes good to go. And so I don't know. I'm curious to hear from the fans because I think maybe I'm more self-conscious about repeating material, and maybe you guys, because I've watched other people's sets multiple times and I still enjoy it. And it's a fun hangout in Colorado. I could potentially do a live podcast, but I'm always reluctant to re-hit cities within about 6 months just to make sure I have enough new material so that you guys feel like you're getting your money's worth when you come out to the show. Matt Balls, they stick so wonderfully. Also love that Chicago show, Robbie. Now I got to sign up for Dave's site to remember what you said during the podcast that was so perfectly hilarious. You see, that's a nice plug, good sir. Thank you. Ambassador Saul, I used to love hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park until it became a trash can for Far Eastern tourists. What are the Far Eastern tourists depositing out there? Is it Zins or is it something else? And then we've got cheer from it's littering like gum, bro. You see, I venture to guess that you guys are mostly right. Gum's a little stickier though. Maybe in New York City it's more acceptable because they do street cleaning, whereas like if you're in a private residence or on someone's lawn, I mostly agree with you guys. All right, here's my next etiquette question for you guys, and I'd almost like to run this experiment. People have differing point of views when it comes to leaning a seat in coach. I would never do that to someone. Even when someone leans into me, I'm not going to lean back. That's how you end up with bombs being exploded in the Middle East. I just stole a Mark Maron joke, and it didn't even really fit. But anyways, point I'm trying to say is I think it's no good leaning your seat in coach. But I've noticed that sometimes I believe people are putting their water bottle in the pouch. And I used to be a big water bottle in the pouch kind of person. You don't want to have to go, especially if you're in a seat and they made you put even just your backpack that you thought you were going to put between your legs up above. And then you want to make sure that you got your water bottle on you. And the pouch is really the only place you can put that. You try and put it underneath the seat, it's rolling all over the plane. But you would think that the back of the seat on the pouch side would almost have a piece of metal in there so whatever you're putting into your pouch doesn't protrude into the other guy's back. But I've had times where people are putting something in that seat that's just kind of getting leverage right into your lower back. And I'm curious, what do you guys think is the etiquette on putting your water bottle into your seat pouch on an airplane? Is that your seat pouch? And so if it's protruding into someone's back, that's your real estate. You overpaid for it. It's on the airline for shoving you in there. Or is it bad etiquette? And then here's my last one. I used to be a big, fast casual tipper. I used to be big on tipping on coffees. And then, sure, it got a little bit out of hand when they started turning around that thing and putting it in front of you and with aggressive options. And the machine's very automatic. The machine's very automatic. The corporations don't want to pay their employees, and they really want to squeeze you for dollars on top of the overpriced coffee to make sure that those people slinging the coffees are making a living. And so, if you're only paying if $1 would be, more than 20%, they'll present it to you like you're being the cheap option, 3, 2, or 1. And then all of a sudden on a more expensive purchase, it suddenly magically transitions from throwing the people $1 to percentages. They know what they're doing. These machines and robots and Jews that orchestrated it to try and sucker you into tipping real well on an overpriced cup of coffee. But you know what really I think is getting me to go the other way on tipping is the new way that Starbucks does it. I'm not a big Starbucks guy. It's mostly an airport. But now you have to click through to specifically not tip them on the cup of coffee. It doesn't give you the option. You have to it's now like it's like almost like an opt out from tipping. And then there's something when they take something that was supposed to be a kind gesture on your part as an assumed too far, where then you suddenly want to be like, well, no, you guys can go fuck yourself. If you're not even going to thank me, if you're not going to appreciate this tip, if you're just going to assume that you earned it for your 20 seconds of work while you were being cunty taking my coffee order, you guys feel like they pushed it a little bit too far? Let's see what we got in the chat. John Popek, yes, it's my pouch, so I'll put what I want in there. I bring a refillable water bottle too, so I'm sure that that's not digging. I'm sure that that's digging. You mean because that's like a metal one? Tuck Fax is, fuck that. I only tip for a haircut nowadays. Nothing else get tips. Well, you cannot tip in a restaurant. In a restaurant with the waiter, you don't have a choice. But when you're walking up to the counter and you're putting in the order, and so they're just handing you the order, like in a Shake Shack type environment or a coffee house, that's where it gets more debatable. And I used to be better about, I'm going to tip these people, but I feel like the machine's gotten more aggressive where it started to irk that part of my brain where in protest, I don't want to do it. Matzo balls, if the tip screen starts at 25% minimum, they get 0 tip. You know, there's something to that where let's be generous and be tippers unless the machine itself presents options that are too aggressive, in which case, if they're being too assumptive about it, then we are refraining from tipping. I'm okay with that. All right, episode brought to you by YoKratom.com, home of the $6 kilo and the only place in the entire world you can get an entire kilo of kratom for just $60. All right, let's get into some news topics here, and let's start with this story. Judge says 2-year-old citizen appears to have been deported with no meaningful process. This was reported by multiple news agencies. This particular story is from Politico, and you got to love this. I mean, it's a judge. You'd think a judge would know the law, and he could make rulings, so I don't know why it would be an appears to be. And I read this one, and I think it's just really incredible, the news environment that we live in now, where, you know, everything is like a crossword puzzle. People, they used to like opening up the New York Times in the morning and doing a crossword puzzle. And now the entire news is essentially a crossword puzzle, a mystery, if you will, where basically they'll tease to you some information that an event happened and give you none of the relevant information so that you got to turn and do your own homework. You know, for all that don't do your own research and trust the experts, there's no topic now that you can get full coverage on without really doing your own homework. So in this one, you just get, there's a lot of questions. You got to be wondering, how is it that a 2-year-old was deported? Are they starting to go into preschools? Are they doing warrantless searches for 2-year-olds in homes? Was this just a 2-year-old American citizen that was just deported out of, because that's the way this reads. This reads like the FBI stormed down a pre-K, saw some kid playing with blocks, picked him up, put him on an airplane, and shipped them to Mexico, and then figured out, oh no, this is an American citizen that we shipped down to Mexico. So what it turns out is I believe this child was an anchor baby. Of course, nobody wants to tell us whether the dad was an American citizen. Nobody. Find me the article that confirms that the dad was not an American, and I believe, based off of all the reporting, that he wasn't. But go ahead, please, find me an article that will actually say that the dad was or was not. So what I believe we have here is a child, an anchor baby, which, you know, I don't think people should be able to run over the borders, pregnant, open up their legs, shoot out a baby like they're spiking a football, and now that child's an American citizen. I think that there's some things that we have to reconsider, and anchor babying is one of them. I'm not against, by the way, I'm not against more, I like people from South America, and I'm not against having more South Americans legally immigrate to this country. But I do think that there should actually be a system and protocols, and it should be in the interest of, we live in a democracy, of what the majority of Americans want. I would be in the non-majority of Americans on this issue, and then I would say get rid of all social benefits and have an open border, and let the free market figure all these things out. But I understand that that's an unpopular position, and I think people should have a government that represents their point of views, and if the majority of Americans don't just want the complete demographic and voting change within this country, they should have a government that actually governs and enacts policies that, you know, does the thing that they pitch to people that they're able to do, which is govern. And in this case, I think the anchor baby of sneaking into the country, having yourself a child, and then being able to stay so that you're not separated from a child, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Now, I do wonder, amidst the current level of deportations, why this particular mother was being deported. apparently, I guess she went in to actually don't go in for your hearings or meetings. Make them come find you. If you actually show up for your hearing or meeting, you might find out that you're being deported. And so, at least what's being reported is that the mom was being deported, had a child under the age of 2. The mother gets the option of whether or not she wants to take the kid or send the kid. I think they need a sponsor at that point, which could have been the dad, which I don't know if the dad is an American citizen. And I guess once the child's 18, if they want to come back to this country, they are considered an American citizen. But in this case, you got the lady. She's being deported. She gets the option whether or not she wants to take her kid. She chose to take her kid. And you've got mainstream media reporting to you as if a random 2-year-old was pulled out of their kindergarten and was then deported. Here was another crazy story, which is you had this Wisconsin judge. And listen, I think there's a very promising story to rounding up criminals in this country and getting them deported. And I think that that's with an actual focus on arresting criminals when they engage in criminal behavior. I think government's inability or lack of focus on that activity is what then gets them to come back and pitch to us that they can only govern by being authoritarian. And I think we're going to look at some of the recent stories and going to realize, oh, wow, there were some good opportunities to actually arrest these people when they engaged in criminal behavior. And so in this case, you have a guy who beat up Americans, I believe. I think it was 2 roommates, and the roommates were Americans. And if not, I guess he's still engaged in violence. He re-sneaks into the country, and now they have a warrant to arrest this guy. He's going to jail for another case, and they see it as a good opportunity to seize him because there's security there. And, you know, you've got to get rid of people who are engaged in criminal activity. And in this case, if you actually have a warrant to deport someone who engaged in violent behavior, for a judge to get in the way of that, I mean, then that doesn't work. If you're going to start violating the law to protect criminals so that criminals don't get deported, that opens up the door for the Donald Trump administration to go, yes, we have to be authoritarians here. And so in this case, you can't be doing that either. There needs to be protocols and mechanisms by which law enforcement can legally get rid of people, particularly if they engaged in violent behavior. All right. Now, completely changing topics here. You know, I do not have a strong take on the autism that is going on in this country, other than I advocate for more of the right kind of autism, the kind of autism that gets people to listen to this show, agree with my opinions, and buy tickets to my comedy shows, and hate the Federal Reserve. Whatever kind of autism that is, I fully support vaccines that would bring about more of that kind of autism. If we could somehow figure out how to get more of the right kind of autism, I can support that. When it comes to RFK Jr., I don't give him a blanket, well, he's RFK Jr., and he's talking out against these companies, and therefore he must be right. That's not to say that he's wrong. Have a little nuance here. I'm saying I haven't read everything by the guy. I haven't read every report. I don't know that the guy's 100% right. All right? I also don't know. The point is, I don't have a strong take on this particular topic because I haven't researched it the way I've researched other ones. And isn't that nice, just being told that, hey, I don't know everything about this topic? I do think it's interesting the extent by which the media apparatus, and sometimes that's the tea leaves, is what is the media apparatus all up in arms about? Because more often than not, when they're up in arms about something, it's because they're lying to you. And then you could start digging in, doing some research and figuring out why it is that they're lying to you. And then you can find some truth. Sometimes the first stage of finding truth is seeing how loudly mainstream media is yelling about something and then going, you guys seem to be real upset. Thou does protest too much. And then you can start digging in and you start finding some truth. Now, in this case, there was an article about, RFK Jr. creating an autism registry. I'm wondering, for all my fellow autists out there, how do you guys feel about an autistic registry that girlfriends can look it up and be like, oh, yeah, this dude's autistic? Or, for all these people that like to claim they're autistic and they're not autistic, I don't actually think I'm autistic. Because it's more of like a girly thing. They love the neurodivergent. Every lady, they like some sweet feel-good points. And so they all like to be out there talking about the neurodivergence. Are they going to take odds with a autism directory where people will be able to look it up and go, you're not on the directory? Why are you out there with your stolen autism valor claiming autism that you don't have? But I don't understand, for all these people that love government and they love government coming in and solving problems, I mean, starting to track the level of autism, whether it's up, whether it's down, whether it's getting worse, you would think these people would love it. Why are we taking issue with the guy who goes, hey, I think there might be a problem here? Why don't we start doing a little bit more science and research and seeing if we could track it? And on that note, here was NBC News. New research contradicts RFK Jr.'s claim that severe autism cases are rising. Once again, I don't know. I don't know. This is early on this one. It's like the early days of COVID. I haven't done all the homework on the autism thing, but I just find it interesting the way that the mainstream media wants to downplay and go, hey, you don't have to look at that. That's not that big of a problem. I mean, just think about the way they sold COVID in the early days, even though only old people were dying. And then this seems to be the inverse, where they want to be like, you know, they could be doing daily segments on the news. There's enough people out there where they could be doing daily segments on the news of kids that are severely autistic or evenly mildly autistic and not doing well in school. If they want to present a story in a sad case, they can do it all day. This one's interesting because usually they're good at playing the alarmism card and going, isn't this horrible? Isn't this tragic? And in this case, they're going the other way with it, where they're trying to be like, hey, guys, that's no big deal. That one's no big deal. John Popick, fuck all registries. We need less lists for the government to monitor. I'm okay with that perspective. John Popick, also, I don't feel like I'm autistic, but I'm convinced I have Asperger's. Didn't they just get rid of Asperger's so that they could have more people, in the autistic category? Which I think is basically what this article is saying as well, is that autism has a wide range and the severe autism is not any worse than it was. All right, let's plug another one of our sponsors, sheathunderwear.com, the official underwear of the Run Your Mouth podcast. It is hot summer sweaty ball season. And if you want to come out, you want to party with us on Porch Story, you want to go out to the beach, you want to go work out in the gym, you want to be on your bicycle, you want to be out with friends in hot, sweaty weather environments, you don't want your thighs rubbing together, you don't want that chafing, you don't want that feeling of skin grinding on skin. No, what you want is smooth sheath underwear, separating your fat thighs from rubbing together, holding everything in place, and absorbing all of that ball sweat, keeping everything fresh and pristine. And you can find Sheath underwear at sheath.com. Use promo code RYM, and you get yourself 20% off the greatest underwear that's ever graced the balls of man. I don't go out on a porch without my sheaths. And you should partake in sheathing as well. Sheath.com, promo code RYM, 20% off. And, okay, this was another one where Market Watch was letting us know about the unintended consequences. Usually, people don't like dipping into the unintended consequences of government policy because they like just endorsing government policy, and they like saying across the board government policy, it's always a good idea, and don't look into the unintended consequences like COVID. Don't look into the unintended consequences of, having my business closed down, my child not showing up for school, not being able to see my loved ones before they die. Let's not look into those unintended consequences. But in this case, they're saying that getting rid of food coloring is going to drive up the cost of food. Never mind the unintended consequence of feeding it to people and then potentially negative health repercussions from consuming these things, and how important it is for food to have yellow number 5. Take Mountain Dew. Would you really be upset if Mountain Dew was flavored the same way but clear? Do you really need it to have that disgusting, like you already pissed something out flavor? I mean, even things that are like fake cherry and strawberry, do you need them to have a bright red color? I mean, do we really even need these phony colors in order to be eating these unhealthy foods? Don't the unhealthy foods have enough sugar and other crap in them to already artificially make them delicious, that we don't need the food coloring? And then, I guess if you socialize the health costs of any of the negative outcomes of these chemicals, then I guess we can be more concerned about driving up the costs of food that would be artificially colored without having them in there. All right, let's change topics to the Supreme Court case that took place last week, trying to legislate not that public schools shouldn't teach your kids trans and gay literature, and even to young kids, but that parents should have a right to opt out of sending their kids to those classes. That if a public school deems that it is important to teach kids trans and gay literature so that they could be more accepting of these lifestyles, or indoctrinated to, think that transing yourself is a good idea. I guess the gay stuff, you're not really indoctrinating people, I don't think. I think if they're gay and want to be gay, they can go ahead and be gay. But, how young do you need to tell this? They'll figure it out. If you're really born that way, I feel like they'll figure it out. We gotta teach the books about the things when they're little kids. They'll figure it out. And so here you have, in front of the Supreme Court, trying to explain why it is necessary to not allow religious individuals who are sending their kids into these schools to be able to go, hey, this is the day that we're doing this book, so my kid isn't going to attend. And so this is Kavanaugh asking the questions of the lawyer, and let's listen to the response of the lawyer, and then we'll respond to it, of the lawyer explaining why it is necessary, why the schools could not grant an opt-out clause to parents with religious kids that don't want to have to learn the trans and gay literature. Let's roll the clip. Let me know if I have sound.
In the country has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The county has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The other Maryland counties have opt-outs for all sorts of things. And yet for this one thing, they changed in mid-year and say no more opt-outs. I'm just not understanding feasibility.
So again, I think what's in the record is that with respect to these books as they were deployed in the classroom, there was high absenteeism in some schools. For example, dozens of students being opted out in, I think Mr. Baxter said the average size of an elementary school in Montgomery County is 700 students. So each grade is 125. If you have dozens of students walking out, making arrangements for those students to have.
We got to pause there and basically say too many kids weren't interested in this, so we have to actively force it upon them. If we let people opt out and we don't make this decision for them, too many of them might not want to do it, and that doesn't work for us because we're trying to indoctrinate these kids, and if we allow them to opt out, too many kids will opt out. And so what he tries to say is, well, there's nothing else that we could do with these kids during that time. I mean, I guess teaching them math, science, something else more relevant, letting them just run around outside. You can have one teacher and just let a bunch of kids run around outside, but then you're like, well, is it to learn the trans literature that the other ones just get to go run around outside? And so he wants to say that too many kids were uninterested in this, that we couldn't offer an opt-out. Let's continue.
Adequate space and supervision and alternative instruction, I think is infeasible.
But
and
they do it for all sorts of other opt-outs.
They don't do it for all sorts of other opt-outs. There's a limited universe of things that students can opt out from. The Family Life and Healthy Sexuality curriculum stands alone. It is mandated by the state. It is something where you are able to predict precisely when the curriculum is going to be deployed. There's
It's the most similar substantively to what we have here, and there's an opt-out allowed there. I guess I'm not understanding why Montgomery County School Board stands alone. I think in the country, you can tell me if there's another school board that's done something like this.
I apologize.
Both the kind of books that are being used and prohibiting opt-outs. And I guess I'm just not understanding. The whole goal, I think, of some of our religion precedents is to look for the win-win, to look for the situation where you can respect the religious beliefs and accommodate the religious beliefs while the state or city or whatever it may be can pursue its goals. And here, they're not asking you to change what's taught in the classroom. They're not asking you to change that at all. A lot of the rhetoric suggests that they might have, that they were trying to do that, but that's not what they're trying to do. They're only seeking to be able to walk out so that they don't have to, the parents don't have their children exposed to these things that are contrary to their own beliefs.
And now we can listen to another Supreme Court justice who, although your tax dollars go to school, and you know, I guess if you can afford private school, you can go pay for private school, but you do have wealth extracted from you by force that pays into the public school system. And for many, that's a better option because they can't afford the private schools, or they live in districts where the public school system is actually quite excellent. And so they send their kids to the public school. And you would think the public school is there to serve the public of that area. And so if a majority of people were trying to change the curriculum to better represent the interests of the parents of those area, the school should acquiesce to the needs of the community that it's looking to serve. But of course, not according to this Supreme Court justice, who thinks you have the choice to not go to that school. If somebody decides that trans and gay literature is important to indoctrinate to your kid, your only option is not to say, hey, can my kid not sit in the class for this one? It's to go pay for private school. Let's roll the clip.
The parent can choose to put their kid elsewhere. You don't have to send your kid to public school. I'm struggling to see how it burdens a parent's religious exercise if the school teaches something that the parent disagrees with. You have a choice. You can homeschool them.
Because that's an option for everyone. And then here was some of the trans literature in question. You've got Uncle Bobby's Wedding. You had this one, The Prince and the Knight, which